What's up, everybody? How you doing tonight? It's Carpo. Yeah, that's right, Carpo. I'm here again, making another video today. I cherish these moments. I came in here inspired to make this video. It's kind of late, getting ready to kick back and watch a movie, and I'm like, I just got to make a video because I go by making, whenever I have either a deep thought or a synchronicity that happens, that's when I usually make a video. And today was weird, I don't know, a strange synchronicity. Two different things happened that conjoined into one thing that I heard somewhere else, which I guess I'll explain that. I was looking up into the sky, and it was a beautiful sunny day, and I was really enjoying doing some yard work, got the chainsaw out, cut some roots, clean some stuff up, yada yada. And then the evening came, and for some reason I started thinking about the planets, the way they affect us. I started thinking about how whenever I bring up things like that, astrology, astrological ideas, some people are really into that, and some people are they just think it's the most foolish primal thing, which is kind of what I used to think when I was younger, that these ancient people came up with this to explain this or that. And then I started, looking a little deeper into it and realizing that these planets do have influence on us, only because the moon obviously has influence on us. Crime rates go up during a full moon, for example. Strange things happen. But statistically, we can see now that certain crime rates go up when there's a full moon, and it's a very strange thing. But we know that the oceans, the tides, rise and fall with the moon, and so point being that it's going to affect us one way or another somehow, whether we know it or not, and I believe that the planets do too. So with that aside, I just wanted to make that clear, that I do believe that the planets influence our behavior to one extent or another. I have no idea how much, and I don't give credibility to all these people that try to tell us what they mean. So now that I got that part out of the way, I have to talk about I was thinking about the stars and astrology, and I was also thinking about what it means, like these. Basically, somebody earlier said something about Mars retrograde. It was a video I was watching, and he said, and thank God Mars retrograde is over. And, it was a record company, Graveface Records, and he said that, we've had a rough few weeks, but it's over, them personally, their company's been having problems. And, that now that the Mars retrograde is over, that, things will be looking up. So, when I heard that, it was just kind of weird. It coincided with the thing I'd been thinking about with the planets. But there was one more thing that tied into this. About an hour before that, I had noticed that a lot of people have had a pretty shitty attitude lately. And these are things that come and go. It's not always a person's fault. Sometimes it's just things that happen. But a lot of people I've met have been kind of rotten. People have said harsh things, sometimes apologetically, sometimes not. And people have seemed to have major problems the last month or so. And I didn't think much of it. And I was going to make a video asking if other people have noticed that. And then when I heard this Mars retrograde thing, or Mercury Retrograde, I went and looked it up, and I found out that it says, which I could read all the crap to you, but basically says that during the Mercury Retrograde, which is like a 3-week period, things are kind of chaotic. Things may break in your life. You may have issues, problems, things you need to work out, and you can't quite seem to make things happen. And then once it's over, supposedly, all these things you start to figure it out, and all these things start to come together. You get more clarity of mind. And so I started to ask myself, how much credibility can we give this? This idea of this, the planets affecting us the way that they tell us that they affect us. In other words, the question I've always had about astrology is not necessarily if it's legitimate, but are the specifics legitimate? And I know that there are schools that people go to do these types of readings. And there's supposedly this, I don't know what it's called, coalition or some shit of, I don't know. But the people get together, and you're supposed to learn how to understand how the planets affect people and individuals, but I also think that there's so much more to it than just this general blanket that, yes, it affects us this way. Because each person obviously is affected differently. Because, if astrology has any validity whatsoever, that means each person's affected differently. So you have to get into specific birth times and charts. And I wouldn't say times, I meant when you were born, during which... I want to get into that. I want to take a hit first. This is one of the things that always gets me, and I always have a problem with when I'm looking into astrology, when people talk about birth dates. And I've had this discussion with a lot of people. I can't break down all the answers that I've gotten from people who believe in numerology and whatnot. But let's take, for example, the person that claims that you can take your birth date and learn something about you. Now that makes sense to me. It makes sense to me that a person who is born on a certain day, a time of the year, during a certain phase, let's say the Sagittarius, the Scorpio, that could affect a person's behavior, it could affect the genetics. There could be something to that. The problem I have is when they break it down to saying, okay, what time were you born? I was born at 8:01 a.m. So they'll add the 8 and the 1 and say, okay, it's 9, or whatever their particulars are. Now time becomes irrelevant. Time is a construct of man, okay? Time is a creation, 60 seconds into 60 minutes. It's become just like the people who use hertz to measure solfeggio frequency. It's not about the numbers, it's about the divisions of the fifths. I can't get into that. That's something totally different. Anyway, we've got too many different thoughts at one time. But I can understand how being born on a certain date could mean something for you astrologically. What I can't understand is how you can add the numbers of that birth date together. Okay, let's say, for example, that a person was born on March 1st, 1979. Okay, this is a perfect example, I think, if I'm not mistaken. February, I believe, used to have 29 days, if I'm not mistaken. They've been robbing days for months, but let's just say February had 29 days. And you were born on March 1st. Now, in the old days, you would have been born on February 29th. Today, you would be born on March 1st. That day would be the same day. Let's say you were born the year they changed it. How would that number difference affect your number outcome when you add all the numbers together? The numerical value of the number of the year and the time you were born. I know this is confusing for people who don't study this shit or haven't looked into it, but for those who have, you'll probably know where I'm going with this. That we're using human measurements to try to understand the universe, which can work only sometimes. For example, I've had people say, well, if you look at the amount of miles it is to the sun, and you add these numbers up, you get this. And you'll also find the same number here if you look at the amount of miles, let's say, around the Earth. And I'll say, well, who? The mile is not a creation of nature. The mile is not a measurement that exists in nature. The mile is an invention of man, just like the meter, and just like every other measurement that we use. It's this point I can't seem to explain when I'm trying to discuss this with people. It's like numbers speak to us, and like astrology seems to have this bearing on us, but I think that we're robbing it of its value by giving it numerical value on things that where it doesn't belong. Numerology goes deep. I mean, when we're talking about, let's say, a person's name, this is another one that's always really kind of, I don't know, it's one of the most iffy things to me, is to take a person's name, break it down to the numerical equivalent of the value of the letters, and then add that together to get a root number of the person. For example, my life path number supposedly is 4, okay? Do I know if that's real or not? I don't know. Do I know if that's, what does that mean? Like, are we buying into believing this shit? If you believe in astrology, are you believing that you have a certain fate? In other words, if you think Mars is going into retrograde, or Mercury's going into retrograde, rather, and you know this is coming because you're into this stuff, haven't you already set yourself up mentally for a bad time? Now that's something to consider too. It comes down to like determinism and that kind of stuff, I guess. Free will, like, damn it, I'm gonna have a bad few weeks. I mean, of course you can fight it. I guess the power of suggestion sometimes is stronger than we realize, and we can fool ourselves. And God, we can do some stupid shit just using our minds. Everything that we do comes down to our brains and the way that we perceive the world. It's like I find myself falling into these routines, these repeating patterns of whether thought or action or just getting stuck in being in one place even. For example, have you ever noticed, like for those who smoke pot, you'll sit and you can get stoned for a while and not really think much of it. You don't even really feel stoned. But let's say you have to go somewhere and you go to the store or something to grab something, you're there and you're like, wow, I'm baked. It's weird. When you leave your environment, you seem to notice these things more. And I've been wondering lately if that has anything to do with, because I read up on this a couple of years back, and somebody was saying that you become like immune to your electrical field, your electromagnetic field in your environment. And so you move to another location and you kind of shift to a different part of the spectrum, if you will. The way they tried to picture it is these waves that are hitting the earth. Some people say like every 7 feet or something like that. I don't really know the details of it, but that, when you move to a different area, for example, they say some people who have had cancer have moved to these other locations, and they believe the difference in the magnetic field is what's cured their cancer, or rather made it go away, because the body is malfunctioning when you have cancer. The idea is to reprogram it. So environment can do that. You can do that through herbs. People have been using cannabis now to program cells to kill themselves, and very well the environment should be able to do it itself. But perhaps there's like a short circuit in the Earth's biorhythm, in the magnetic field. I've looked at these magnetic field anomalies in the Earth. I live in the Pacific Northwest, and we live in a pretty low area, I believe, of magnetism. It's kind of a blue, and then there's like other areas really high, like high magnetism, and there's these just amazing fields of just all around us, that we're all part of. Like, for example, the Schumann resonance, which is like 8 hertz, 8 cycles per second. I think it's like 7.2, 7.4, I don't know. Some people say 8, maybe it's 8 now, but that's the resonance that's created by the Earth itself. It's the vibrational frequency of the Earth is 8 hertz. It's caused by all the lightning around the Earth, all the earthquakes, all the landslides, all the tectonic action. Everything that happens is combined into this one frequency, which the Earth resonates and reverberates with. And it's bounced, I believe, off the ionosphere back and forth, and it just creates this resonant pattern of energy, because everything is energy, everything's vibration. I mean, we know that, but it's an amazing thing when you really think about it. We got caught up in our simple lives sometimes, or rather not so simple, and we got it pretty rough as humans, trying to live through all this bullshit, trying to figure out what's really going on. One day you've got a good faith in mankind and everybody's nice, and the next day everybody's a dick and you feel like people are just no good. One day you think that you just want to live forever, the next day you wonder why people want to go on beyond, once they can't move on their own anymore, or their body starts to give out, and you go back and forth, and that's what being human is. These thoughts that I have, these ideas, these aren't thoughts of my own. These are thoughts of the world. These are things that everybody thinks about. Maybe not the same particulars, but this is why I think the internet exchange is so important, because I hear particulars and ideas that I'd never even considered before. People who speak an ethereal mind to kind of show me the deeper side of life, but also those with the rational mind to show me the logical side and to have reason and to remind me to keep myself within reason. I consider myself a logical person, but I realize that I have a mystical side that I can't seem to shake. It's always been there, and I think psychedelics played a huge part in that. It played a huge part in me wanting to seek out the answers to, existence for the fun of the search. It's like taking the road trip of life. I mean, I look back and it all started when I remember seeing this flower just dissect in front of my face. It was like anybody who's taken a large dose of LSD has probably had an experience where something just blew up in front of them, and that's kind of what the flower did. And it was like, because I looked down at this flower and it just, like all the pistils, stamen, every little piece of it, just in my mind, I could just see how it all went together. But more than that, I just understood, and I felt the harmony with the earth. I looked around at the trees, and they swirled in this big connected body. And I was 15 years old. And, I was young, it was quite an experience. Those things changed me forever and put me on this path to this metaphysical belief that I can't shake. No matter how logical I want to be about life, no matter how rational I try to be, I just can't rationalize nature in its existence, in its entirety. In other words, when I look at the connections in nature, I've had people say, hey, that's just random mutation. But I don't care. Over 15 billion years, it doesn't matter how long the Earth has been here. What is it, 4.5 billion years now? And I think that they say the universe is 15 billion, and life's been here, 3 billion years or something? Even in that amount of time, with starting over, cataclysms, rebuilding, life might have only been here for, say, 1 billion years now. It doesn't matter. The chances of all of this forming as it is and being so interconnected just seems so ludicrous to me. They say that the chances of all this happening by chance are so astronomical. This is not an excuse to believe in God. That's not what I'm saying, nor believe in a religion. It's not an excuse to buy into what other people are telling you. What it means is that when you see a chameleon change color, or an octopus change to mimic its environment, you have to ask yourself, how does natural selection produce an octopus? A genius octopus, such a beautiful creature that can mimic exactly its environment. Or a lizard, for that matter. Or certain animals that chose to evolve, and others that have been here for tens of millions of years that have not changed a bit. Certain lizards, alligators, crocodiles. Nature picks and chooses what it wants to evolve and what it doesn't. Nature seems to have a mind of its own. Gaia seems to have a mind of her own. And if this is true, then that means that the Earth is alive, which means that the solar system is alive as an entity itself. This puts the sun at the center of the universe. This puts sun as the god of our solar system. So, it all goes back to all the ancient beliefs, and, people nitpick and choose the various, technical, detailed aspects of it. But the fact is, sun is God. But sun is not the universe. You see, it's the shield of Helios, which is what the sun was represented as, the shield of Helios, which you can see God's word reflected off that shield, but you can't directly experience it. Therefore, this is why it was symbolized as Jesus, which is the middleman between God and man. They say you cannot reach God except through Jesus. And it's what that's saying to me is you cannot reach the universal mind except through the sun, because the sun is the creator of the earth. The sun is the creator of everything on our planet. And that, my friends, is a beautiful freaking thing. I mean, you look up at that beautiful, beautiful ball in the sky, and people sit and argue about whether it's hot or cold or electric or nuclear. I just gave up caring. Just don't care anymore. It's the sun. It's mystical. It's a wondrous thing. Maybe one day we'll send something to the center of the sun. Who knows? It's doubtful. Till then, we can only speculate. You can do laboratory experiments, but you can't replicate something like the sun. You'll never know exactly what's in the center of the sun. Might be a bunch of crocodiles playing dice. You just don't know. So the universe goes on doing what it does. We have these moments of inspiration and understanding, which are sparsely intertwined between times of confusion and chaos and utter noise and, raising families, going to work, doing what we do. And so I guess, in conclusion, since I've covered such a wide variety of random things in this video, I must have had a lot to think about, but to tie it all together, I would say I'd like to see, I guess, my main point would be that there's no way for me to confirm many of my beliefs or ideas. The fact that I believe that the universe is aware of my existence is my choice to believe, and my choice alone. Is something that I have no evidence for, nor do I care to prove. So I guess if you want to say I believe in God, you can say that, although I don't believe in a man with a beard, and I don't believe in a heaven or a place in the clouds. I believe in various stages and realms, which can be explained through the mysteries and the mystery schools. That's their metaphoric example of what it is. But for us to understand it, I don't think that's possible. But for me, it's something that makes... no matter how logical I try to be, like I said, I still cannot get over the fact that evolution itself seems so damn impossible. The fact that we have evolved to where we are today, this consciousness. Make choices, like plants, smoking pot, consuming a plant to take on a plant consciousness, to alter parts of the body or the mind, or to reach a state of, something different, not to escape reality, but to enhance reality, because reality itself is such an amazing thing. I want to experience every angle of that reality, every facet. And there seems to be something to all this ancient talk. And I've studied it all, but I don't want to really get into it because it's just there's too much to talk about with the ancients and supposedly, the Sumerians and the Egyptians and all this ancient lore. What it comes down to is I just want to know the raw basics, because I know many of their religions were just like today. They're just made up nonsense, human sacrifice and all this. I mean, people talk about these guys like they were like these advanced races, but yeah, they built big ass structures. We don't know how, but they killed each other. Just like we do. I mean, sacrificed them to God because they didn't understand things like we do through science. This is why I respect science strongly, but I still think that it's not going to answer the biggest questions for us. So, if you want to be logical, you have to use science. And because it's the best we have, and to me, it makes sense. The scientific method is a great method. But the fact is, for me, I've realized that many of the stranger things that happen in life, the miracles, the interesting things, can't be repeated. Therefore, they can't be scientifically proven. And in that regard, you either believe in them or you don't. And this is where faith comes in. So, I hate to be one that says I have faith, but I guess I do. I have faith that there's something greater than myself, and it's not harming me to believe that. It's not harming anyone around me to believe that. If anything, it's helping to make life more interesting. But I don't just believe it to be comfortable. I don't just say, well, there's something greater than me because I want to believe this. I just say, well, this is, I can't understand how a flower could evolve to attract a bee, and a bee could evolve to look like a flower, or a flower to look like a bee, or a bird, or a butterfly that has a face that looks like an owl when the wings are out, or trees and mushrooms learning to work together in this team, this symbiotic relationship where they can send signals. Trees feed their young. They actually send nutrients through the top branches down to the smaller trees. So, while you were always taught in school, hey, the trees drown each other out and it's this competition, the reality is that they're feeding the smaller trees. They need their company. They know that. The whole world is alive and aware. And people think that's hokey. But I don't give a shit, because that's just what I believe. I mean, and it's funny because most people either say, okay, well, that's cool, you believe that, or people say, well, I believe that too. But the people who don't, the ones who are very, very material oriented, the ones who don't want to believe in anything, they seem to be very combative and hostile. They'll say things like, a fantasy. They'll use words like fantasy, fairy tale, those kinds of things, because they want to belittle a person. They want to make a person who believes in something greater look like a fool. But in reality, they look like the fool because there's no reason they should be trying to prove their point. It doesn't make any difference. There's a huge difference between people who are confronting like religious fanatics and those who are just saying, oh, you believe in something bigger, you must be nuts. Or, I've seen people who go ballistic on people who believe in psychics, any type of psychics, or, they'll refer back to the, millions of dollars at stake for anyone who can prove conclusively that they're psychic. We do our best to believe what we want. I guess that's just, we're humans. We're going to believe what we want. And for me, believing what I want isn't as important as believing what's true. And the truth to me is more important than my own hopes. And the truth seems to be that the world's aware of us in more ways than just us being aware of the world. If that makes sense. This video is probably getting pretty long, so I'm going to go and I'm going to bid you adieu, and thanks for coming along for the ride. Namaste.